Hello, welcome to our home. For any new listeners, my name's Jordan. It's just me today. It's my first solo episode. And the title of today's episode is, give me a sec. If God has a plan, he must cause the bad things too, right? So that's what we are going to be discussing today. Now, I hear a lot and see a lot, oh, I could never believe in a God that causes bad things to happen. Well, me neither. So I'm glad we agree on that. I think it's a very common misconception that God causes bad things to happen. And I think that comes because Christians either believe that God has this big plan, that we are all kind of just cogs in a machine, and that people who don't believe in God are non-Christians, that that's what they think Christians believe, or that's what they were told when we were growing up. So as a kid growing up, I heard all about God's plan, oh, God has a plan for your life. And you hear the kind of rubbish trite that everything happens for a reason, it's all part of some big plan, and that's just not true. And it doesn't say that in the Bible. Now, I can understand why people think that. I think some verses and some concepts are misunderstood, which is what we're going to be talking about today. But I think even if you're not a Christian, if you've believed that the bad things that happen in your life were caused by God, or that is something that stops you from believing in God, I'd urge you to just take the time. This isn't going to be long, hopefully about 15 minutes. Just take the time to listen to this. I am going to be reading out of the Bible, but not as a way to preach at you, but just to show you that if this is something that is stopping you from believing that God could be real, that what you believe or what you've been led to believe is not actually said in this book, and it isn't what Christians should believe. If you are a Christian and you have been believing this, then hopefully today, by the end of it, you'll begin to think, oh, maybe I've misunderstood that, and that maybe actually, you have more power, and a good power, not a bad power, that you have more power in your own story to make the decisions that you want to make. So about a month ago, we post on YouTube all the time, but I had a YouTube short, and in this short I was talking about love and the types of love that you receive. And if you receive a love that isn't from God, that you don't receive love, you receive insecurity. And someone commented, isn't everything from God? Now I said, I believe all good things come from God, but not everything we get to experience in this life comes from God. He said, I mean, believe what you wish, of course, but if God made everything, then the bad things come from God as well. Now, I don't think this person believes in God. I think they were trying to catch me out. But what they've done here is take the God that I believe in, or take the God of the Bible, and try and put something on him that is not true by saying, believe what you wish, of course, but if God made everything, then the bad things come from God as well. So the first thing I think that is misunderstood in the Bible, or just a general misunderstanding, is that God created everything. It doesn't say that. Genesis 1:31, it says, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. So the creation that God initially made was good, and it was meant to be good. But things that are good things that were created to be made good can be used for bad. And this was my response. If I create a baseball bat, this was my response to the comment. If I create a baseball bat for my son so he can learn to play the sport and give him instructions on how to use it safely, but instead he uses it to hit someone and causes them harm, or accidentally hurts himself as he didn't read the safety booklet properly, was the baseball bat bad, or were my son's actions bad? I created both my son and the baseball bat. Both were made to be good and to bring joy, but my son was still free to make his own decisions. If I forced my son to only make the decisions I believe were best, would he love me or would he resent me? Would he learn anything for himself if he was never able to make his own choices? And would it be love if he never had his own free will? So would it even be love if he never had his own free will to make his own decisions? And so there's a lot to unpack in that story. There was actually quite a few similes or parables, but the main thing that I wanted to establish was that things that were created to be good can be used for bad. Now, if you're still struggling to understand what I mean by that from the story, I created both my son and the baseball bat, as I said in the story. Both were created to be good. I would never have imagined, or when you're having a child, you never sit there and go, oh, this child's going to do bad things. Or I would hope you wouldn't think that anyway. I would not think that. When having a kid, you are hoping and praying that they would bring life, that they would bring joy, that they would be that. Same with the baseball bat. The baseball bat was created to be a gift, to show my love, as love can be expressed through gifts. It was meant to be a good thing, a thing that he could use to play sports, a thing that he could use to learn lessons through sports, and something that ultimately would bring joy and enhance his life. Now, no matter how many conversations I have with my son, no matter how many times he reads the safety booklet or instructions that I gave him, the moment that I am not with him, he has complete free will to decide to do whatever he wants to do with that baseball bat. And he can take something that was meant to be used for good, that was meant to bring joy, and use it to cause bad. That was what I was trying to establish with that story, just to show that there are things on this earth that are bad. There are outcomes of things that have happened and causes that have created bad things, but it doesn't mean that initially it was meant to be that way. It doesn't mean that the things that were created to be good, when God looked at the earth and saw everything that he had made and declared that it was good, that those things were actually meant to cause harm. If you're following. Again, if you have any questions, or if I've not explained this very well, it is my first time doing something like this, so we're not expecting it to be perfect, but you are welcome to leave comments on videos. You are welcome to message directly. You can email us. I'll give you the email now. It's contact@ourhomepodcast. Oh God, I've forgotten the email. I'll leave the email in the caption. contact@ourhomepodcast.com. No, it is. It's contact@ourhomepodcast.com. I will confirm that, but I'm pretty sure it's that. And then free will. I think free will is a big thing because, again, as I've said already, we're all led to believe that God has this big master plan, this big cosmic plan, and kind of like, if you think of a machine, we're all just cogs in the machine that work towards some big plan. And for me, that's very disempowering, because that takes away my ability to do anything. If God has some big plan, then really there's nothing for me to do. Whatever I do, God's already planned it, and I'm kind of just going through the motions. But that isn't what this book says. That isn't what the Bible says, and that is not how I believe God designed humans to be. I fully believe that God created us to co-labor with him, to work equally, not as equals with him, but to work equally with him, to put in the same amount of work. Now, he does the things that we cannot do. He does the impossible, but we are here to put in that work. And the greatest example I've found recently of free will in the Bible comes in Genesis 19. Now, Genesis 1:19, at this point, God's made the Garden of Eden, and he has made Adam. And he's noticed that Adam's alone, and he's said, oh, it's not good for man to be alone, so I will try and create I will create the perfect helper for a suitable helper for him. And so what he does is he creates all the animals on the land and the birds in the sky. And then in chapter 19, he says, now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and the birds in the sky. He brought them to man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So I'll read it again and put Adam's name in just to be clear. He brought them to Adam to see what Adam would name them. And whatever Adam called each living creature, that was its name. So even in the very first instance, the very first example of man, it displays that God gave Adam free will to name them whatever he wanted. It does not say that he knew, well, he would have known what Adam was going to call them, but it does not say that he had a name for them and he put that into Adam's brain, or that it was all part of his plan. It was actually such a great show of love that God had created this man, and then he'd created these animals to help them. And instead of saying, this is what they're called, look after them, he said, actually, I love you so much that you can call them whatever you want, even stupid names, whatever you want to call them, call it. And I will honor that, and I will respect that. It's the same as having a child. In fact, I remember I got a teddy bear from Build-A-Bear, and I called it Boo Bear, which is a stupid name if you think about it. Boo Bear. It was this bear with blue dots, and I decided to call it Boo Bear. But your parents love you so much in that moment, they give you the teddy and they say, you can call this whatever you want. and you say, I want to call it Boo Bear, and they don't go, no, that's a stupid name. Well, hopefully they don't go. Mine didn't. They didn't go, my parents didn't go, no, that's a stupid name. You can't call it that. It needs to be called Teddy or Roger or whatever you want to call, whatever a suitable name for a teddy bear would be. In their, what's the word? In their higher wisdom, in their higher knowledge, in their more advanced, I can't think of the word, in their, this is going to do my head in. In their further knowledge, I'll just say, the fact that they are more intelligent, it will come back to me and it will do my head in, but the fact that they are more intelligent, they don't take that and force it upon me. No, they let me exercise my free will by giving me free rein to name the teddy that they had brought. It's a great example of my parents acting as God would. I wanted a friend or needed a friend, and I would have had friends, but an extra friend, you know, and they created the teddy, they bought the teddy, they gave it to me and said, no, you name it. You can name it whatever you want, even if it's stupid, and we'll honour that and call it that too and love you through that. And that's what God did here with Adam. He gave him complete free will to do so. So we've established that we do have free will on this earth, and that from the very first instance, God was demonstrating that humans had free will to do what they want. Now, the plans part, I think, comes from misunderstanding Jeremiah 29:11. It's one of the most common Christian verses. And it starts by saying, for I know the plans I have for you. And this is a prophet. This is God speaking through a prophet to the people, saying, for I know the plans I have for you. And I think a lot of Christians stop there. They just stop at that point, for I know the plans I have for you. And this is what has been communicated to so many of us. This is what was communicated to me, not necessarily through my parents, but just through the general education that I had on God. You know, we would sing, you're part of God's plan and stuff. And it just stops right there. But when you continue to read the verse, it says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. So what God is not saying is, I have a plan. Don't worry. You're part of a big machine. You're just a small cog. And this plan, don't worry. It's all planned out. And that's that. What he says is, no, I have plans, but those plans are to prosper you. Those plans are to give you a hope and a future. It's an invitation to trust him, to step into the plan that he has for us if we want it. We only have that plan, or we can only step into that plan if we trust him. So if you read the verse again, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. These plans are to prosper you and not to harm you. These plans are to give you hope and a future. It completely changes the way that we then perceive the verse. You realize that actually you have free will because you don't have to step into God's plan. You absolutely do not. You don't have to step into God's plan. In fact, you can walk away from it at any time. Now, does that mean that if we walk away from it, we're completely done? Well, no, because if we go into Romans 8, chapter 28, and it says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. And we know that in all things God works for the good in those who love him. So what does that tell us? Well, I look back at my own life and think there are so many opportunities that God provided me with, so many times where I could have gone on to do so much more than I did and I walked away from it, or my inadequacy, my own not trusting God, my own failings caused me to fail in that particular area. But in trusting God recently, the way that he has been able to turn my life around, it just absolutely confirms that in all things, God works for the good of those. So when we're thinking of God's plan and being able to step into God's plan, I look back and think, had I been in a different place with God, had I trusted God more, my life probably would look differently right now. In an alternate reality, my life could look completely differently if I'd had different foundations and a different trust and a different belief in God. But that doesn't mean that I walked away from God's plan. Now, God knowing every decision that I would make is different to God planning out my entire life. God knows the decisions that I will make because he is all-knowing, because he knows everything. But he has given me the free will to choose to step into the plan that he has for me. I could have chosen to step into this plan much earlier. I didn't. I went my own way. It didn't really work out. But now I've made the choice to step into God's plan. And in the last 18 months, the way that my life has turned around, the way that God has worked good in so many areas, the way that God's worked good in my family. We'll get into that another time on the podcast, I'm sure. But the way that my family is now able to relate to each other, the way that I'm able to relate to my family, more importantly, is incredible, because we were pretty broken. And God has worked good in all things, in every area of my life that I have allowed God to work in, that I have trusted him with. He has worked good. He's absolutely worked good. It's been incredible. But what this shows is that when bad things happen, like a child being sexually abused by an older girl, terrible things like that, for so long, I believed that God had allowed that to happen to me. And I asked the question, God, why didn't you stop it? Why couldn't my parents have walked in? Why couldn't the Holy Spirit have prompted them? Why was this allowed to happen? Why would you allow that to happen to a child? Because I believed that God had a plan. I believed that God had planned everything out for my life, so the bad things had to come from him as well. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that just isn't true, because he doesn't say that. In this book, right here, he doesn't say that. He doesn't say that he has planned out every area of my life. In fact, I've realized that bad things happen. Although all things were made for good, bad things happen. Now, why do bad things happen? That's a whole nother video. It's a big topic, which hopefully I'll do one day, but it's not for right now. This video was to talk about plans, the plans that God has for us, and the belief that our plans, and the belief that we are all just part of God's big plan and there's nothing we can do, and the fact that that isn't true. We have free will because God has given us free will, and it's our choice to trust God, to step into the plan so that we may prosper, so that we may hope and we may have a future. That is what he promises. That is his promise when he talks about plans. But now, just quickly, I know that there are some very bad things that happen, like I just said, like what happened with me. I've spoke about that it's in the first episode if you want to go listen. But that was terrible, and that happened to me, and I have been able to work through that with God. I have been able to see the lies that I was believing that God caused that or God allowed it, which wasn't true, and being able to get to this place that I am now at. Now, there are even worse things that happen, children get sick, babies get sick. Is there an answer for that? No, there's no good answer for that. That is an extremely difficult question. And I know from conversations with my mum that often in church that these questions have kind of been shunned. People are not allowed to express them, and they're not allowed to. Maybe once, you ask the question, and it's you've just got to trust in God's goodness. God is good. You have to trust in his plan, and then almost that's it. The pastoral care that should have been there to be able to ask these questions just hasn't been there in the majority of churches, and just the majority of life. Non-Christians have these questions, and instead of being able to ask these in a safe place, but in a way that's deemed allowed, it's just shunned. Oh, God's just good. It's part of his plan. All this rubbish Christian trite. So I just want to say that if you have these difficult questions, if some unspeakable bad has happened to you, that if you can, instead of believing that God caused this, what really helped me was understanding that when I went through these terrible things, when I felt alone, when I was feeling this pain, is that Jesus was stood right next to me when I cried, when I felt so dirty and disgusting from what had happened to me. Jesus was sat there and his heart broke for me. The same way that my heart broke, his heart broke too. Because of the scars that he has on his wrist, when he came down, he is able to experience everything that I have experienced. And instead of him causing it, he cried at the same time. He shed the tears. And hopefully, if you have these questions, if you've gone through something similar, if you've gone through something equally or exceedingly painful, I want to encourage you that that is where Jesus is. Jesus did not cause this. God did not cause this, but he went through it with you every step of the way. And if you still have these questions, that is it's no bad thing. It's not bad at all. In fact, it's fantastic. I would encourage you to just bring these questions to God directly, because that is what he wants. He wants direct relationship. He wants us to ask these questions straight to him. Bring them straight to him. In fact, humans may get turned off by negative emotions. You know, you could say that you hate God because of these questions. Oh, I hate God because he allowed this to happen. I hate God because these things are allowed to go on in the earth. And that may turn me off as a human. That may turn other Christians off. But it would never turn God off. God would never say, oh, those feelings that you're feeling are too strong. Don't come near me. There is no emotion, no question, nothing that you could have that would cause God to want to separate from you. Ever. In fact, I am certain that he is waiting. If you have these questions and it's kept you from him, he's sat there like, okay, I'm just waiting for you to bring these questions to me. Bring the questions to me, because then at least you're in his presence. And that is when, and I know from experience, that is when the healings can occur. That is when your heart can be restored, and that's when God has the opportunity to work good. That is when God has the opportunity to work good from unspeakable bad. So, thank you for listening to that. I hope that wherever you are, if you're a Christian, if you believe in God, if you've walked away from the faith, if you don't believe in God but have struggled to believe in God because you just can't understand why bad things could happen, hopefully this begins to answer it. It's certainly not the be-all and end-all. This is the start of a conversation to hopefully change perspectives, which leads into further questions. This, as I said, is a big topic, which is like a tree. This is the bottom, and it springs up and then branches out into so many different directions of deep conversations. But hopefully this is the start. Hopefully this resonates. And yeah, that's it really. Hopefully it resonates. Yeah. I'd encourage you to, if you don't do anything else, just read Genesis 1 to 2. And 1 and 2, that is what God wanted for the earth. That perfection, that garden, that relationship, that place, that paradise, that goodness is what God wanted for the earth. That is what he wanted for me, and that is what he wanted for you. But yeah, I would encourage you to, if nothing else, just go away and read that and try to read it through the lens that everything God created was meant for good. It was never meant to harm you. It was never meant to hurt you, and that he never causes harm in your life. He never causes hurt in your life. He never brings that to you. He never takes anyone away from you. Not up to heaven anyway. He doesn't take people up to heaven. He doesn't take them away from you. Heaven gains angels, but he doesn't take them away because they're too good for this earth. None of that. So, thank you for listening. As I said at the beginning, our email is contact@ourhomepodcast.com. I will put that in the bio just to make sure. We do have a Facebook community as well. That should be in the link in our bio. So if you want to click that, take a look. You can join the community if you want to be a part of this. We've said before that our heart for this really is we want to invite people into our hearts. We want to invite people into our homes. We want that open door. Unfortunately, with a home that's limited size, there's only limited people that you can invite in at any point. But the great thing about being online is that there's unlimited capacity. So if you want to come and be a part of that, even if you're unsure, you don't have to be Christian at all. If you just want to be around people that genuinely want to support you, want to pray for you, want to love you, then please feel free to join. That is open to anyone. Yeah, follow us as well if you don't follow us. And if you want to share this with anyone who you feel may benefit, then please do. So thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next time.